People of Reddit, what stupid rule at your work school backfired beautifully? Story 1: Zero tolerance ended shortly after a bully got thrown through a window, because if I'm getting suspended for defending myself, I'm gonna make it worth my while. Story 2: Back in 2014 our HR made a rule people couldn't go to other buildings. We had 3 buildings within a block of each other. All 3 had shipping areas and the warehouse employees had to go to each building to work. We were told to stay at one building. I mentioned we ship out of all 3 who is going to do the work. The genius said, oh, it'll be taken care of. Next day 500K shipment didn't go out. The following day we have a meeting. Why didn't you ship this? 2 days ago we were told to stay in our building and someone would take care of it. The rule was quickly changed. Story 3 required every employee to use electronic time clocks to punch in out for work including lunch. Punching in late or leaving early would cause your pay to be docked and getting a discipline letter. Multiple people wanted to sabotage the clocks, cut the cords, etc., but wiser heads prevailed. Everyone arrived several minutes early and left late, every single day, to avoid getting into trouble. Unfortunately, this created unimpeachable evidence of hours worked. The employer had to pay out thousands of dollars in overtime the first month. The clocks disappeared exactly 5 weeks after they were installed with no notification. Story 4: Every shift, there's a quota we need to fulfill, and then even if you do fulfill it, you have to keep working until your 8 hours are up. Cue everyone speeding for 4 hours, having a 3-hour lunch coffee break, then slowly moving there for an hour. No rule about us taking necessary breaks if we're still capable of reaching the quota. Now we're allowed to stop once we're done. Story 5: I worked at Starbucks for like 5 years before and during undergrad, and at one point our district manager thought it was a good idea to implement a just say yes policy, where we literally weren't allowed to tell the customer no. Lasted for about 3 months, and in that 3 months our unaccounted product and waste went up over 300, because when the POS didn't have a way to punch in a customer request we had to just do it anyways. We also got complaints from stores in surrounding districts because they had angry customers who were requesting things that were against local food service code, and told them that we did it for them at our store. I knew exactly how that policy was going to play out, and I just laughed every time management was freaking out about the problems it was causing. Story 6: When COVID started our boss demanded that our entire team sit in on group Zoom calls, even if the topics on the agenda didn't have anything to do with their roles. She felt it would build team unity. Productivity dropped, negative Google reviews came in, staff became more stressed. When she demanded answers on the next Zoom call, one of my coworkers bluntly said, well, I would reply to this woman's voicemail, but I'm stuck on this Zoom call. Story 7: The bottom floor of my secondary school was a square that had corridor all the way around. After some incident where a kid got knocked over, they implemented a one-way system. Unfortunately, they were very strict on enforcing it. If you accidentally walked past your class, you couldn't just turn around. They seemed very proud of their new rule, until everyone started showing up late for class because they had to do extra laps of the bottom floor. Story 8: I am the one who lives closest to work, so if the building alarm goes off overnight, I'm first on the list to get the call from the alarm company. It used to be that if we had good reason to believe the alarm was not an actual break and we could tell them not to summon the police and ignore the alarm. I can access the building cameras from home. The most common alarm was the cleaning crew who were always messing up the disarming. Then a sister site ignored an alarm that turned out to be an actual break-in, and the facilities director decided that no matter what, if there was an alarm we should have the alarm company summon the police, then go to the building, get the police all clear, and reset the alarm. This was a pain in the butt rare enough, and I lived literally 2 minutes away. Then we contracted for the alarm company to come in and replace all of our panels and sensors. It was a nightmare process that ultimately ended up taking months, and the whole time there were phantom alarms, sometimes multiple times a night. Each time I had to go out in the middle of the night, I'd prepare the required report, send it to the facilities director, and request to go back to the old process. Each time he said no. We couldn't afford to miss a potential real break-in. After about 3 weeks of this nonsense, I was due for some time off. I was going out of town, and the protocol for that was for me to ignore calls from the alarm company, so they moved to the next person on the list, which happened to be the facilities director. In the 5 days I was off, I must have ignored at least 4 overnight calls that all would have gone to him next. Then suddenly, nothing. When I got back I was informed that for the duration of the alarm update, we just weren't going to arm the building at all. So much for can't afford to risk a break-in. Story 9: A long while back, but my school banned the color pink because a bunch of students were wearing it one October, and they thought it was a gang thing. It was for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The rule didn't go well for them. Story 10: My spouse's workplace realized they didn't have a policy about sending images or jokes as part of their email acceptable use policy, so they added it, except they made it a firing offense to send or receive content. I think the intent was to stop people from subscribing to such content. They also said that your access would be immediately revoked until a determination was made. So someone got fired for something else and decided to send their whole management chain a graphically image, then report it using the anonymous tip line. IT got the report, concluded they did indeed receive content, and did as required, suspended all the involved email accounts, including the SVPs. The policy has since been reworded. Story 11: Late 80s high school, rule was no shorts. Classmate came for an exam with basketball shorts on that were below her knees. Teacher made her go home to change. She came back in a micro miniskirt and wrote her exam. Story 12. Couldn't buy drinks at lunch with cash money, had to buy some voucher. They were just cheaply made laminated pieces of paper. This was 2001. I was 13 and bored, scanned the vouchers and printed them out on paper that kinda matched the color of the vouchers, and laminated 10 myself. They were horrible made and not even the right color on the backside, also crudely cut out. I made about 100 of them have passed them out after I tried paying with them for myself and encountered no problems, made some new friends and upped production. Took them about 3 weeks to find out, but by then the fakes ones had intermingled with the real ones and had already been resold to students via the student office. About half of the vouchers sold were fakes. Drinks were cash only from then on. They had no choice to accept the fakes one for a little while longer though, as they had sold and charged for some of them. Story 13. To make moving between classes more efficient, they had designated up and down stairways, but they didn't take into account that the stairs were located at the ends of the very long corridors, which meant it was impossible to get to your next class on time. Because of this, no one bothered trying to get to class on time and just blamed the stairway rule. Story 14. Not really a rule, but a change in policy. I used to work for a major beer distributor as a delivery driver. They decided to start using less glue in the packaging to save money. We're talking a few cents per package. As a result, breakage during distribution increased drastically, causing them to eat a lot more damaged product. It caused such a large loss in profit that they quickly changed course. Edit. Since everyone is making guesses about which company I worked for, it was Anheuser-Busch, but it seems this is a common trial period for many beverage distributors. Story 15. Students used to smoke in the toilets, so headmaster decided to lock all male toilets except 5 places in one. Now my school had around 700 students, out of which around 300 were male. Everyone realized that it became impossible to go to the toilet quickly. Result, some guys went in one and pissed defecated in all trash cans. A lot. No one found them, but all the other toilets opened up immediately. Edit. For clarification, this happened in Eastern Europe. Story 16. I went to a strict Catholic school with uniforms. The kids in 4th to 8th grade had to wear belts until we got a new principal who made it mandatory for all the kids in the school to wear belts. Many bathroom accidents from kindergartners, 1st and 2nd graders later, and complaints from parents. Of course the principal rescinded her addition to the dress code. More recently, this principal was fired for embezzling money from the school. Story 17. You can't speak a foreign language at work unless you're a certified translator in that language. We had a guy in a customer service position that spoke Spanish as a second language. Yeah, his regular Spanish-speaking customers were confused as to why he could no longer speak to them in Spanish, because they knew he was fluent. Eventually Jay explains to them in English that they made it against the rules for him to speak Spanish. They weren't happy about that. Story 18. Back in the early aughts, my high school implemented a policy that you had to wear your ID tag at all times. If you didn't have it on, you were sent home. So many students lost their ID tag to go grab food or skip a class. We were the only graduating class to wear them all 4 years. The policy ended soon after. Story 19. I worked at a language teaching center where the lessons are pre-planned by the curriculum, and on weekdays we often only have 2 to 3 hours of classes sporadically spread out through the afternoon evening. The management were pretty chill when I started, and people just planned their lessons in bulk, which basically entailed checking your schedule and printing out the required unit session worksheets, and just showed up 10 minutes before to deliver the lesson. On weekends would have full 10-hour workdays. Apart from that, we'd have the odd training session or faculty meeting, but otherwise you could basically go home or go do whatever you wanted between lessons. All the provided apartments were within 10 minutes walking distance of the center, so this was pretty ideal. The nice managers left, and the new management were who started scheduling mandatory office hours where we had to be in the center with absolutely nothing to do. There'd be a 1200 staff meeting and my next lesson would be at 4 to 6 p.m., and then 3.5 bullshit office hours in the middle. When we asked them what we should do, they said think about your teaching methods. Basically bullshit dick waving. A bunch of the other teachers starting watching movies on the projectors in the spare classrooms. I brought in my Switch. Some people would just straight up go nap on the beanbags in the reading nook. The thing was there was literally no busy work they could generate, and soon it was apparent to everyone, especially prospective new students and parents, how unprofessional and awful it made the center look. The managers embarrassingly just stopped scheduling and enforcing these office hours. Story 20. Back in 2011, a company I worked for had the bright idea to block all social networks because, employees should work instead of slacking off on Facebook. I could write volumes of books on the toxic culture in that place, but the owner-president, who lived in a different country and visited about once every few months, was universally feared by everyone, and a few days before his arrival the whole building went into panic mode. So a few weeks after the social network ban, His Royal Highness shows up, and 5 minutes later half of IT department is scrambling to his office. Apparently there was an issue with the Wi-Fi, or at least that's what he figured since he couldn't log onto Facebook. It was fixed in seconds. A few years and 3 promotions later, I make a joke about it with him. Instead of a laugh, I get a confused look. Turns out he still thinks it was some internet problem since whoever decided to ban social networks didn't have to tell him about it after the incident. Story 21. I was working as a medical assistant at a private practice medical clinic. Our clinic manager wouldn't allow the new receptionist to drive to the bank to deposit cash, made her walk carrying the money bag so that she couldn't drive away with the money. Bizarre, I know. That went on for a few weeks. Then the receptionist was mugged and over $1,000 in cash was stolen. She was allowed to drive after that. Story 22 Control Freak Boss says all rescheduling of a lesson with a client should be run through a secretary, who will do the room reservation update, and keep me updated. Implicit threat: if you let clients reschedule too easily, you are a worthless wimp that I don't want to work with. Old version client contacts you directly. You work it out together quickly and inform the secretary of the new date time so she can change the room reservation. Boom and done. New version secretary receives change request from client, but doesn't know your availabilities. Contacts you, gets your availabilities. Sends them to client when she has time, because it's frankly a low priority for her. Clients eventually picks a date, and sends it back to the secretary, who sends it on to you. You send confirmation, or calendars often have changed in the meantime due to new circumstances, so back and forth a few times before a new date time is chosen. Secretary reserves the room for that time date. This chews up so much time that the secretary falls behind with her other work, slowing down the process, which increases the chance of a calendar change obliging another run-through. The new system lasted about 4 days, then an overloaded secretary went on stress-related medical leave. The workload was shared in equal parts between the other secretaries, so, 3 days later, another secretary went on stress-related sick leave. When the boss tried to reapportion the workload again, he got an immediate faceful of "WTF is wrong with you?" and the next to last secretary stormed out in tears to go on stress-related sick leave. The new system died right there and then, as the French say, when you chase away the easy way, it will come galloping back. Edit: this took place in France, where since 2005 employers have been legally obliged to actively reduce sources of stress, and doctor's notes are easy to get. Employers cannot question them at all easily, nor force the employee back to work. They can't even telephone them. Story 23 Not a stupid rule, but I think this should apply. I'm in aviation maintenance and wanted to leave the current company that I worked for 12 years with. During my interview at the new company, I was asked why I was thinking of leaving my current job, being that it was a good and reputable company. I said new management is all about efficiency and not the one thing aviation maintenance is all about: safety. Interviewer liked my interview and assured their company doesn't cut any corners in safety versus cost. I get the job. Fast forward 6 months or so, I'm the new guy, so I get the short end and have to work Christmas Eve. Should be a short day. Boss's plane is coming in from Cabo to drop off chartered passengers, fill up on fuel and take him and family to their vacation home in Aspen. Plane arrives, and as I'm doing my post-flight walk around, I see a big problem that forces me to ground the plane. Boss is clearly not happy. Attempts to force me to make an unapproved repair. I deny to do so and am sent home. Sweet, I didn't quit, it's documented and I get to go home earlier than planned on a holiday. Someone else gets called in to do the Mickey Mouse of a repair. Everyone's happy. Plane taxis out with owner and family, full on fuel, and tries to take off. Oops. Crappy repair failed. Huge component breaks off and goes into the inlet of the jet engine. Grenades that engine. Planes brakes overheat trying to stop the heavy plane with just one engine. Some fuselage is damaged from the engine that gave out and the plane finally comes to a stop. FA comes in. Sweet. Who made this repair? Who accepted to take this flight? What company operates this way? So, dummy tech that tried to make the repair gets his license revoked. The boss. This cost him millions and they couldn't fire me. I got to tell the story over and over and over with a big smile on my face. Story 24 My mother was an elementary school teacher. For years the teacher's be quiet signal was holding up one hand in a peace sign. Well, the principal decided that this didn't have enough meaning and invented her own. At a staff meeting she explained that her new sign stood for ears listening, eyes looking, lips locked. She then made an L with her index finger and thumb and held it in front of her forehead. This principal didn't take criticism well, so none of the staff members were willing to tell her that she was making the loser sign. And so the new sign was taught to the children. Most of them made fun of it. Some of the more sensitive ones got upset by it. Overall it was a disaster, and within a few weeks they went back to the peace sign. Story 25 Boss bitched and complained that we all welders and millwrights took lunch and breaks whenever we felt like it, actually just when we got the chance, and implemented a rule that if you didn't take your break lunch at the right time you didn't get them. Myself and another welder got sent to do a repair that was about a 2-hour drive from the shop first thing in the morning. Boss said it was going to be a quick fix, so we didn't bring our lunches. We needed the machine running ASAP because it was costing $250,000 an hour for downtime. Turns out his quick fix was a pretty major welding job, and required us to completely rebuild a motor mount. The operator knew this and had told the boss that was what needed to be done. Well, guess what, boss man? If you just let us take our lunches and breaks when we wanted, or had at least told us what the actual job was, we wouldn't have driven 2 hours to the job, done 1 hour of work, driven another 2 hours back to the shop, ate lunch at noon like we were supposed to, and then driven 2 hours back to the job to finish it. TLDR boss's power trip cost over $1 million in a single day so that we could eat our lunches on time. Story 26 At my old school you could get suspended for most minor infractions. This included smoking. However, if you were a witness to other people smoking, then you would get suspended along with them. So this ended up with everyone constantly working together to hide the smokers at all cost, otherwise just about everyone would be suspended. Story 27 In Las Vegas, the fire departments had a policy that if someone called out and you covered their shift, you get paid overtime. Eventually every firefighter at every department was trading shifts so that they were always making overtime. went on unnoticed for over a year. It was a huge scandal, and the ones in charge who let it go on and effectively cost the city millions had the book thrown at them hard. Edit typo edit 2 wanted to make sure my information was accurate. Found this article with more info. The Clark County Fire Department employed 739 full-time firefighters in 2009. Of that number, 565.76. 5% received total wages in excess of $100,000. While the $63,433 in base pay that the average firefighter received might be reasonable, the average firefighter was able to more than double that amount on the final paycheck, receiving pay for longevity, paramedic training, and other allowances, as well as $25,688 in callback and overtime to collect $129,476 in total pay. Including the $43,422 in benefits, the average firefighter received a total compensation package of $172,898. Some firefighters took home amounts far greater than the average. 2 firefighters took home wages in excess of $400,000. Several firefighters approached $100,000 in callback and overtime alone. 2 firefighters received more than $90,000 in benefits alone. Each had more than $80,000 deposited by the county into his retirement account. Story 28. My Catholic school told us to leave space for angels while dancing at middle school dances. The theology teacher then told us angels have no physical form. Cue lots of kids gleefully defending their attempts at dirty dancing. Story 29. My boss started putting all staff required to start 15 minutes earlier than indicated on the roster. I started keeping track of my unpaid overtime and stung her for 3 paid days off. That's not required anymore. Story 30. In my high school they were worried about gang activity, so they made wearing solid red or blue shirts against the rules, but only black male students would get in trouble for it. In protest one day, all the black male students wore black shirts and everyone else wore red or blue shirts. After asking some of the white guys if they were in gangs, they figured out what was going on and retracted the rule. Story 31. Telework was deemed unattainable for most Fed jobs, much to employees' dismay. Then COVID hit. Now it's all portable. Good luck to the government if they try to revert back to no telework. Story 32. This one is great. We had a no dating at work rule, then the director started seeing someone and other people had their hidden relationships as well. That rule was nullified when the director announced his engagement, and so about 6 other couples came out. We no longer have that rule. However, people are to let the admin know of relationships now. Story 33. I would say zero tolerance. Before that, kids would get in fights and one, maybe both get suspended. Today, kids get sent to the hospital because what's the point of going easy when you can best the out of a kid and have the same results? Story 34. In my high school in the late 80s-90s, shorts weren't allowed to be worn by anyone and females weren't allowed to wear tank tops. The student body made an agreement we'd all wear skirts and tank tops until the rules were either no one wears tanks, everyone wears tanks, and skirt shorts allowed as long and they are not shorter than 2 above the knee. Boys shaved their legs. Girls grew their armpit hair out. The principal broke down and agreed to change the dress code after 2 weeks because parents were upset not about the clothing, but because their teen boys were shaving their legs and their daughters had armpit hair. Story 35. My HS had a smoking in the bathroom problem, and to solve it, rather than having a teacher outside the restrooms during hall time, they locked all the bathrooms except one. This made it so you had to wait in a stupid long line with 1,200 other students trying to use 3 stalls for each gender in the 10 minutes between classes. During class time they had the assistant principal sit outside the one open bathroom and they would check your ID and sign you in and out, and only 1 student in at a time. 1. Major health code violation. 2. Kids would be holding it all day. 3. Girls on their cycle needed the restroom and would often have to get a pass from class to go use the restroom. BC. The lines were too long during breaks. 4. Smokers still smoked in the gym locker rooms during changing time. This rule didn't solve anything but made it very unhygienic and rather annoying to just use the restroom. Story 36. Not mine, but an old roommate of mine was a senior developer for a small company. It was an open secret that one of the other senior devs, a guy who had been there since the beginning, would sometimes spend time looking at plastic surgery photos, before-after shots, photos of active procedures, etc. He did it enough that people would poke fun at him about it, but he didn't seem embarrassed about it, and it wasn't harming anyone. Well, one day a project manager said something to the CEO about this guy's ongoing plastic surgery obsession, and the CEO flipped. He said that, going forward, no one was allowed to use their work computers to access external websites at all. Anyone who's ever been a developer knows that half the job is Googling stuff, so this policy pretty much halted productivity in its tracks. It only lasted a day before the CEO retracted the rule, but let everyone know that their browser history would be monitored going forward. After that, no one really changed their behavior, they just started remotely accessing their home computers to browse instead. Story 37. The private school where I used to work hired a second deputy head, whose main function seemed to be creating rules and policies without stopping to consider whether they were really needed. Their piece de resistance was to give all the students little laminated cards advising them that if they were being harassed for some reason, this person always pronounced the word as harassed, they were supposed to tell their tormentor, "I've had enough. I want you to stop saying that." The students, all in their mid to late teens, reacted predictably. Most of the cards were soon spotted floating in the river that ran through the village where the school was located. and the phrase "I've had enough," I want you to stop doing saying that was used frequently by students to whichever member of staff asked them to comb their hair, make their bed, settle down, and work. I do remember asking one of the school's star rugby players whether the phrase had ever been used the way it had been intended, and his response was, "Yes, but I kicked the guy in the while I said it." Story 38. In chemistry class we had plastic bottles of distilled water which could be squeezed to produce a small jet of water. We used to spray one another's crotches to make it look like you'd peed yourself. To counter this, our teacher introduced a punishment to anyone caught spraying or having been sprayed. Hence, if you could spray someone and get away with it, they would have wet trousers and have to write excerpts from a Martin Luther King speech. Needless to say, the punishment for being sprayed was quickly abolished. Story 39. People were wasting time hanging out in the bathroom during class. Solution: only unlocking bathrooms in between classes for a luxurious 4 minutes. By the time the door was unlocked and the line queued up, 10 to 15 extra minutes of class time was lost. They had to allow students to use the restroom during class again. The horror, oh wow, seems like my school was not the only one. I bet this is an American thing though. Story 40. New IT contractor implemented monthly password updates and a long list of exclusions in the passwords: no recognizable words, multiple number symbols, etc. When the CEO stopped by our branch, his first question was why everyone had a post-it on their monitor with their current password. Story 41. There was a very strict no visible bra strap rule at my school, even if you were wearing a tank top with thick straps. Even if it accidentally fell to the side as bra straps do. Being the smart I was, I just took my bra off whenever I got yelled at LMAO. Story 42. The grocery store I work at is now required to charge 5 cents for plastic bags. Because of this we have a lot of customers requesting paper bags. Since our paper bags we typically double bag so they don't rip. Well, one day the store manager sees a cashier doubling paper bags and yells at them because paper bags are more expensive and we can't afford to double bag them. So now we have a new rule: you can't double paper bags unless they're really heavy. Fast forward a couple weeks, and my bagger is using single paper bags. Right as the store manager walks by, the bagger picks up one of the bags that wasn't even that heavy and it rips right open. Right in front of the manager. We're allowed to double bag them now. Story 43. Not sure if this applies, but I worked at a restaurant that started doing Thursday night trivia in hopes of more traffic. The prize for the winner was their ticket would get comped. One guy asked to have every oni in the restaurant's food put on his ticket, and then they stopped doing trivia night. Story 44. My school was crazy. Well, the boys were. The school made a rule that any ruler may not be longer than 10 km, about 4 inches, because there were always measuring contests being held in the free time between classes. And I'm not kidding here. Yeah, in the end they just put two together and measured their dicks. My school was crazy, but I loved every centimeter inch of it. Story 45. In my high school, if you were late for a class they would not let you in the door. They would send you to the tardy center to get a tardy pass. You get so many of those and you were assigned detention or Saturday school, but while you were going to collect your pass was also the time in which they took attendance. Not being there, you would be marked absent. The attendance was recorded on Scantron cards, placed on a clip outside the classroom, and was picked up early in the period by a member of student government who took it to the office for processing. They would then rectify the attendance records with those of the tardy center, and if you had checked in with the tardy center, your attendance was counted, so if you were late to class you might as well not bother going. Story 46. I worked on this company that had mandatory 1-hour lunch breaks. Since we ate on the premises, our lunch break was often 15 minutes or so. We tried negotiating having shorter lunch breaks so we could leave earlier and beat traffic. Next day an email was sent from the OWN stating the fixed work and break hours for the whole team, and they were to be followed, no exceptions. Cool. Next week, a big client called about halfway through our lunch, and nobody moved. It rang and rang until said owner took the call, talked to them, and immediately came to scold us. Sorry boss, as per your rules, we are off until 1 p.m. no exceptions. A couple of weeks later, we did some work on site for the same client. They were, to be honest, one of the coolest clients I ever had in my life. They took us out to lunch, and while talking we ended up relaying the owner's rule. They had a big chuckle over it, and while the project lasted, they made a point to always call while we were at lunch break just to annoy owner. Story 47. At my school the only consequence for anything was detention. Consequence for not going to detention was detention, and if you didn't go to that, detention, and if you didn't go to that. Story 48. During high school, as a way to try and improve behavior and decrease amount of people in detention, so they brought in this new rule halfway through term where you couldn't sit with your friends during lunch at the canteen, but had to sit with your homeroom class. And if you were caught sitting with your friends you'd be given after-school detention. Backfired tremendously. Initially most people stuck to the rule, but around 23 weeks and we all got fed up, so more and more people started sitting with their friends in the canteen. Within just over a month no one followed the rule anymore, and they just ended up with more than double the people in detention. Turns out if you threaten the whole school with detention and no one listens, eventually you'll have too many people in detention, so they scrapped it after 6 weeks. Story 49. My workplace originally allowed 5 paid sick days and paid out a small bonus if employees had perfect attendance. They did away with the bonus. Now people treat the sick days like vacation days. Story 50. Boys at my school started a fight club. They would pick times to meet up in the bathrooms, usually during class time, and they would just wrestle on the floor, and they would then come back to class after a bit. Teachers would think the long amount of time spent in the bathrooms was just boys being boys, but they started getting suspicious after boys kept coming back covered in water pee as some of them started peeing on the floor. To make getting knocked down worse, the teachers put up a rule that only 2 to 3 boys could go at a time to the bathroom, and there was always a security guard standing outside the bathroom. Well, the boys created a team roster chart type thing, and the 2 to 3 boys sent in at a time would wrestle, then move their names up the chart. If they won, teachers never found out. Story 51. Christian school. So there was always the morning prayer before classes started. Our principal decided that people who wouldn't get there on time 8 a.m. for the prayer would stay outside for the first period. Literally backfired from the first days because basically everyone came in late and there were barely any students. Story 52. They stopped paying for extra hours because the only reason we needed extra hours was because we didn't organize our work properly. First, people stopped working late. Some tasks were just impossible to perform within working hours. They ended up having to pay 4 Saturdays in a row, 150 of the income to 2x times more people just to get back in schedule. Story 53. Oh, I think this kind of fits. My 8th grade French class was a challenge for the teacher, so she came up with a system where if we were good for a day, we got to move a letter over. Once we spelled out the phrase, we chose Cosmo Kramer BC late 90s. We got to have a party and she would make crepes. Somehow, she didn't notice that we would move a few letters over every time, and literally every week she'd end up saying, "Time to bring the crepe maker," so like backfired in that we played the system and our challenging class status went from overt to covert. Story 54. My calculus teacher happened to be my girlfriend's mom, but that's another story. Was a stickler when it came to being fully engaged in class, so she banned all food and beverages except water. Unfortunately, what she didn't consider was that her class was right after the football and wrestling team's joint weight training session, which resulted in 6 to 10 protein-crazed athletes slamming down protein shakes and unreasonable amounts of meat immediately before class. As you may imagine, this resulted in all of us getting the protein shits 30 minutes later and had to leave class to use the bathroom every single day. One day eventually she had enough and read us the riot act, so my sorry had to go to my girlfriend's house to look her mother, me strictest teacher, in the eyes and explain that her no food policy was causing student athletes to have violent protein shits during her class. Edit: to provide some closure here, she was not a flexible woman, but she was pragmatic, so once I put things in terms of letting us space out the eating to avoid 13 or her class disappearing for 15 minutes every day, she relented. I stayed away from her house for a good 2 weeks afterwards though, just to be safe. Story 55. My old workplace had a control freak bean counter. At one point she decided that any purchase of equipment must come with documentation showing that we had searched around the internet and prove you got the best deal. Honestly, it was unenforceable, so our supervisor just told us to ignore it, and that deal with a backlash. So one day I had to buy some tools for the workshop, and I happened to come across a bunch of coolers on sale. It just happened that we needed coolers to transport stuff, so I bought one. I brought it back, we measured it and found it was the perfect size for what we had planned. Turns out that time the bean counter was watching us. She came strolling in my supervisor's office with a printout from Amazon and the boss in tow, saying that she had found a similar cooler for cheaper. My supervisor took a look at the printout. So you found a cooler that's $2 cheaper? Yes. How much time did you spend looking this up? Just 1 hour of work, and you think Rum should have spent 1 hour of his workday to shop for coolers? Yes, you do realize we pay Rum $17 an hour. We need 3 coolers. Right now he grabbed those cooler while out on a supply run, and you'd rather have him spend 1 hour of his day at 17 a.m. hour to save 6. And while we're at it, supervisor pulls out a broken vice grip from under his desk. This is the cheapo brand vice grip you approved. Now, this is fine for your regular at-home needs, but we're a workshop and need some quality stuff. We've been using a good stuff brand vice for 3 years, cheapo lasted 6 months. Do the math. So my old job was very stressful, but the manager was an arswipe. After a while, he noticed people would go in the freezer because they would be having a stress-induced breakdown. After a while he put a sign on the freezer door saying no breakdowns in the freezer, jokes on him. We started doing it in front of customers to make him look bad.